Beth Pinkley Johnson, welcome to Women Investor Live.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
We met at InvestHer last summer, and I'm so happy that you're here because you are a lender.
I sure am. A private money lender. We're based in Washington State. I don't think I could be farther away from you, but we've been doing it for about a decade now, my husband and I.
That's amazing. So just to give you and the audience a little intro why I'm doing this, back during COVID, I had read a stat that of all of the commercial real estate investors in the US, only 3% were women. And half of those are spouses who sign on their husband's guarantee for loans and inherited. So that meant that I own a shopping center portfolio in South Florida. That meant that I was part of 1.5%. I thought that was terrible. And I thought, how can I help fix that? Or why is that happening? So I started interviewing women like my friends saying, hey, are you investing? And they're like, yeah. I go, well, where are you investing? The stock market. Okay, but you're in commercial real estate. Like you do that for your job every day. Why don't you invest in commercial real estate? Well, I don't have $1 million. You don't need $1 million. Oh, well, it's complicated and risky. So is the stock market. So I kept bugging everyone that I would talk to. And finally, a bunch of them kept saying, well, I don't know any other women doing it. Aha, of course, because there's only 1.5% of us doing it. So I said, that's a problem I can solve. So I did a virtual summit with 100 women. And then for 4 years in a row, we've had a live summit, but we cap it at around 250. It was just about 3 weeks ago. It sold out a month in advance, but it's a very intimate group. And now women are starting to invest with each other in the room, which is phenomenal. But because I capped the attendance, I realized I'm not reaching as many women as I want. So I started the podcast. So now every time I meet a woman that that invests in just even one property, I said, I need you on the podcast, because the more women that are on the podcast and the more women in our audience that meets people like you, it brings up so much more exposure and awareness, because they're not out on the golf course talking to their buddies like the guys about the deals they're investing in. So this has to be like our golf course.
Ain't that the truth? My husband spends all his time on the golf course, and I'll tell you, he raises capital on the golf course. He closes loans on the golf course. Kudos to him. Sucks for me because I'm back at the office doing loans and doing the back office work. But you're 100% right, and I love the mission that you're on. I think I'm on a similar mission. I mean, I grew up in real estate. My parents brought me into the fold. We didn't do anything that was commercial, so I will say that that was a blind spot of mine growing up. But at least I was exposed to it as a child. And to be honest with you, when I encountered a divorce 10 years ago, being able to go into real estate and work part-time so I could be a single mom to my kids, that's how I got out of it. That's how I rebuilt myself. I mean, I was financially devastated by my past relationship, and I don't know if I don't know how quickly I could have gotten out of it without real estate investing as something to lean back on. And so I love what you're doing. I try to educate as many women to lend as well, because I think that we do it better.
Yeah, I remember the first live conference, which was 4 years ago, I think 3 years ago. I had a lender panel, and I had a woman that was with Principal Mutual Life that had been there 40 years. I had a banker, like a community banker lender. She had been with the company 30 years. And then I had a young girl who was a mortgage broker. And I asked all of them, how many women have you lent to? And the Principal Mutual Life woman said, one. That wasn't a spouse, right? One in over 40 years. And the banker said she thinks it was two, and the young girl hadn't yet done any deals with any women. So, and I have a similar story to you. I got a divorce, and thankfully I was already LPing in deals, but it allowed me, as a single parent of a 4-year-old, I was a president of this big company 45 minutes away from my house. My nanny was raising my son, and I was able to kind of go semi-retire and leave that big company because I'm like, I can't have my nanny raising my son. I had a son at 40
Yeah.
and this just isn't working out. And without that passive income to help me like transition into a non-corporate role, I wouldn't have been able to do it. There would have been velvet handcuffs. I would have been down there forever.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I just think that the more we can share these stories, because I think that some women are afraid to maybe leave bad relationships, or they're trying to figure out, well, how am I going to restart? I was 38 when I restarted. Seems young now. I mean, I turned 50 later this year, but it's not, it's not that young, but it's not that old, and it's never too late to start. And I think we're both living proof of that. So it's been a fun
100%.
journey. I never thought that I'd be running a private money lending business and going out in there and speaking publicly about it. But the more and more I talk with other women, the more important that kind of message really is to be shared, because we're such empaths, women, and nurturers, and it's hard to put ourselves first. It's hard to think about what we want for ourselves. And so, if it's anything in the realm of real estate, most of what we're exposed to is flipping, HGTV and all these things. And like, quite frankly, I don't want to have kids running around hoarder homes while I'm trying to pull up nails and re-roof the house. And yes, you can go and get people to do that for you, but I find that passive investing has just been the path of least resistance for me. Yes, it's a full-time business now, but my children are older. But it did create a source of extra income for me as a side hustle that really allowed me to elevate myself out and far exceed what it was that I lost in my past relationship. So
Yeah.
it's been a fun journey.
Yeah. I started my first 7 deals. I was an LP with my boss and my partner of that corporation that I was with. And then when I went on my own, I said, okay, I can GP. I saw how he did this. I can do this. And all 90% of what I've done is in shopping centers, because that's what I've been doing for 39 years. But GPing is a lot harder. So then I
Oh,
went and
yeah.
GP'd 13 deals. And now I'm turning 65 this year. Crazy. But now I'm back to LPing with women in their deals. So I've done 17 LPs, and I would say 13 are in women's deals all around the country. When I GP, I do it within 10 minutes of my house. My retail portfolio is all within 10. I'm a control freak, so I like to get to the properties, within 15 minutes. But now I'm LPing with a woman in California. I'm LPing with 2 ladies that are investing in limited stay hotels in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So, and I just announced that so last year we kind of made a little money on the conference, but this year we made 39,000 whopping. The first 2 years
Wow.
we lost a lot of money, but it's not about making money on the conference. So I announced that I'm going to take all of the profits and invest in 1 or 2, depending how much the profits are, but to invest in a woman's deal from the profits of the conference.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So let's talk about, so how funny, Beth and Beth.
Yes.
I had a Bethany recently, so it's a theme. So how you started with your family. So your family they were investors. What kind of investors were they?
My dad was into fix and flips, and he was a landlord. I remember early on, we lived out in the country on 10 acres, and I'm adopted. So I've just, been a part of I'm the youngest of 5, been part of a big family my whole life. And I remember early on, my dad had a plot of land at the bottom of our 1-lane road, like 2-mile 1-lane road. And he subdivided it. And he had this huge sign out that was on like a 4x8 sheet of like melamine. He had it all subdivided and he was just selling them like just word of mouth. I mean, because back then you didn't have the internet in the 80s. You didn't have, we had Thomas guides, and you just kind of had to like drive by something to be exposed to a good deal. He was a woodshop teacher, and he really wanted to be in real estate, but as a side hustle. He wanted to build up his pension and retire as a teacher, but he also knew that he wasn't going to get rich that way. So from the time that I was little, I was dragged to these homes. They had well, of course, again, we didn't have internet, but there was no TV. So I would just sit and listen to I don't know, Miami sound machine on my Walkman, just watching him work. And he'd like put me to work, cleaning up rooms or sweeping this and that. There wasn't really anything to be done. He was just trying to keep us busy and create a solid work ethic. But I don't remember a time in my life as a young kid where I wasn't involved in these projects on the peripheral, basis. I just didn't know anything about the financing side of things. But I'm grateful because you do meet so many women in particular that were never exposed to it, or their husband did it on the side and didn't share that journey with them. Their families weren't a part of it, and we have to go out and figure this out on our own. So it's nice to know that there's avenues like your podcast that really help educate them and work side by side with them so they can learn it. Because this is the only reason why I'm in this today, is because of my mom and dad.
So was this in Washington?
Yes.
And are all your siblings doing it now? Or did they go, I'm not doing that? Or are they all involved in some manner?
I have three older brothers. They were all biological sons. My mom adopted two girls from Vietnam. My sister's not into real estate, but my three brothers are have all invested in homes before. One of them is in real estate investing and development. He was a builder from early on. The other is a commercial appraiser. So we've all been in the business in some form or fashion.
So what was so were you investing while you were married the first time? And then,
Yes.
okay, so you were doing investing together with your spouse. And
We
then
did our first flip and borrowed money from my parents, and he was in construction management, so it just seemed like a good fit. My dad would teach him, right? So he'd come over and they would install cabinets together. They would rewire some electrical in the kitchen. They would do some of the plumbing together. My dad was always part of our adventure, and my ex was able to learn from him. But he also had a very he was very handy. He's the consummate craftsman. And then that experience in construction management just really lent itself well. So we just always thought we are going to do it as a side hustle. I was on all fours painting trim at 9 months pregnant, thinking like, do I really want to do this? Not just the marriage, but do I really want to do this flipping too? I probably felt both, to be honest with you. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do either one of these. So like me, but I knew I wanted to be in real estate, and I just didn't realize that I could be the bank. I didn't realize that I could take this legacy 401k from my previous employer and use that to fund other people's deals, or even, some of the people within my network. It just wasn't something that I had been exposed to until after the divorce.
So you're married and you guys are doing fix and flips. Did you build up a portfolio, or were you just like doing them and selling them, doing them and selling them? So when it came to get divorced, it was kind of neat and clean.
Well, divorce is never neat and clean. You probably know that too, Beth. We did our first flip, like I did a live-in flip. And of course, this is the early 2000s, right? I don't know what it was like in Florida, but I can only imagine. I mean, I was in multi-offer situations all the time. Just trying to get into my first home as a single woman in my early 20s was very difficult. And I was up against a lot of competition, but I was finally able to find a FISBO, move into it, fix it up, and I sold it literally 2 years, maybe like 2 weeks, made like 125,000 on it, got that check, and I'm like, wow, I'd never held so much money.
Right.
And so you're just kind of capitalizing on the time. It's not like I really did anything right,
Right. We got
but it
lucky.
was the yeah, we totally did. And so we did it another time. We moved into another home together this time, put a ton of sweat equity into it. I mean, uh, might have scraped off some ceilings by myself with the blind shut, throwing it into bags, wearing masks. I don't know. Doing it the scrappy way, but I learned how to lay tile. I can cut a line into some paint like nobody's business. And then all the
Wow.
heavier lifting my husband did.
Right.
Uh, but then '08 hit. And so we had a flip, we had a live-in flip. We had just purchased another home. I was pregnant. There's a little bit of a mixed bag. My ex-husband was working part-time as an owner's rep on a
Right.
massive custom build,
Mhm.
and found ourselves stuck with three homes. So we ended up fortunately being able to sell that small flip, our first non-live-in flip, and then had to rent out our house. And we didn't lose money on it because we did a lot of sweat equity, but we
Right.
had to rent it for a year and then sell it. And we just made our money back out of it. And I consider that,
You win.
coming relatively unscathed for a lot of people who lost a lot back then. I think we
For
did well.
sure. So then you get divorced and you are now a single parent. Are you doing real estate at all during that time before you met Mike?
No, I was just gonna Matt. I was just
Matt.
gonna rinse and repeat. I didn't have very much at all. My ex had bought me out of the home that back in 2013, 2014, property valuations weren't really where they were supposed to be given what happened in '08. They still had not rebounded. So I didn't get much, but I put it into a home. I didn't want to rent. I wanted to have a stable place for my kids and I to be. And so I knew that that's the path where I needed to start first. So I bought a home. I did some fixing up just like I normally do, but it was still a nice place and a safe place for us. Then I probably sold it 2 years and maybe 2 months. So I was always
That's
doing the same thing to take advantage of capital gains exemptions, right? It was
right.
something that I knew and that I would learn from my parents that if I keep doing this, then I'll do okay. But I was able to then cash out of that, buy a property in Seattle that we found off market. It was a rooming house that had been leased out by the room to ex-cons and sex offenders. It was definitely a crisis of conscience and a very interesting I guess it's not an experiment. These are people's lives, right? They have been reformed, so to speak, and did their time, and they just needed a stable place to live and a quiet existence, and not many people give them to that. So we were able to get into that property, my Matt and I, my now husband, and that was kind of the start of it. Just finding some really good purchases, doing some private lending on the side, making some
So wait,
points
so
and
when
some
did that
interest on it.
start? When did the private lending start? Did you meet Matt and he goes, we can just private lend, or was it
Yeah.
his idea, your idea? Like, where did this idea come from? Because I have never done that, but now with my mission, I'm obviously now, I'm providing equity, but I'm thinking I could probably also do this, but I don't know
Yeah.
anything about it. So how did you go from investing, fix and flipping to let's just lend some money?
A bottle of wine and a boat. I was set up on a blind date. It was literally my first date after the divorce. People have heard me on other podcasts. I've told this story before. It's not my like finer moment in life. It just happens to be my journey. And that I was like, let's just start anew. And I didn't want to meet anybody off the internet. I didn't know what that was like. And so I had one of my best friends set me up, was a dad at school. She didn't know him super well, but I figured, well, at least somebody I know who knows somebody I know, right? And different than a stranger on the internet. Well, Matt and I, we just connected instantly. He was the youngest of five. He grew up on a farm. He skipped a grade. I mean, a lot of little superficial things that really just gelled us, real estate too. And we'd go out in the boat and just float and soak and drink wine and talk real estate. And he talked about private lending. And I didn't know that the loans that I took out from my parents were private money.
Right.
And I just got exposed that way very easily. And he said he was going to start it back up again. And I thought, well, I have program management and marketing and readiness background for tech and telecom. I'll help you. And at that time, Beth, I was working for like an admin fee. I think I was like, this is so cool. I'm stay at home mom. I'm working part time, working from home for Microsoft. If I can help them fund a couple of deals here and there and make a $1,500 processing fee, I am winning. Like that's a
Yeah.
supplemental income. I could do it at home. I get to spend more time with this guy I really like, and he's cute. And it worked out that way. And it just exploded from there. Couple of investors turned into more. Turns out I do my job pretty well, even though I didn't know what I was doing. Um, Brought in some other investors. He had this crazy ad in the newspaper that just said, "My family has money to lend, credit, income, no problem." And the classified ad was just a brilliant way 10 years ago. I mean, I don't think it would be as solid anymore, but it was a wonderful way to generate some really qualified leads. It was a great way for us to be able to spend time together and do something that we enjoy. And I got to learn from the best. He really knew what he was doing. He's a visionary. He very much saw a need out there with real estate investors who had trapped equity and really could benefit from having a second lien position loan and safeguard that first low interest first mortgage. And so I just kind of followed his lead on that. And when it just kind of started a firestorm of active business. 4 years later, we quit our jobs and are running it full time. He makes me 50% partner. And next thing you know, we're living together, and then we secretly get married. And I'm like, what happened here? Was never going to get married again. I was never going to work full time while my kids were young. I mean, like everything I said I was going to do, I did, and I failed. And then I did what came up in front of me that I never had even
Amazing.
planned on. Yeah.
So tell us about, so you lend now, do you raise a fund and lend the fund money? Is just tell us about the program. And you wrote a book, Lend to Live,
That's
right?
right. Yes.
So everyone
Published
go,
with Bigger Pockets.
yeah. So can they buy, where can they get it?
You can get it on biggerpockets.com. You can get it on amazon.com. I'd recommend getting it on Bigger Pockets. There's a few extra supplemental materials that I put in there. My past life in telecom and tech was in instructional design as well. So it was very important for me to make sure that it was a very thorough, actionable book that gave you the system, the CPR lending system, the whole end-to-end life cycle, all the key considerations, all the things that you need to be aware of, and how to make some of those decisions on your own, or what you need to look at. So it's started out with two investors, my 401k that I transferred over to self-directed IRA. Matt had some money, and it just sort of grew from there. But we would directly place our clients' capital on the security instrument. So the trust deed or the mortgage in certain states, we would place it on there. We were hyper local in Washington. And then we just let our performance speak for itself. So we were never out there raising capital. We just wanted to grow organically. I, quite frankly, was naive and thought that this would just be a part-time gig forever and I'd be okay with that. Never really assuming that investor number two would tell, his golf buddies, and then they would go and tell their cousins. And now next thing you know, their sister has some capital and she wants to invest. Our investor celebrations are a lot of fun because everybody knows each other. I mean, it's all referral based, but
Tell
we
me
got
about
to
an investor celebration. I've never had an
yeah.
investor celebration. Now my investors are going to hear this and go, we need an investor celebration. What is that?
Well, we've always been a little bit like a club, we really catered to the high net worth individuals that were typically boomers. I mean, I have some young investors too, young 30s, 40s, 50s, but there were a lot of boomers that really had PTSD from the Great Recession. And they're like, well, I'm not going to outlive another stock market crash. I know real estate, but I'm not going to, you know, pimp my property out to a property manager because old school people don't do that. I'm just going to sell my properties. I'm going to liquidate and simplify my estate, and I'm going to lend on real estate through you guys. And it just made sense. But they liked being part of a club. They wanted to pick the loan that they looked at. I would give them a 2 to 3 page overview, and I'd have the borrower information on it, the loan information, the use of funds, comparable properties. And that way they got to go on the internet. They could drive by it if they wanted to. So when they come to our investor celebration, it's like a club. This is a chance for them to really get together socially. It's not like an annual meeting where I'm giving a whole bunch of presentations on our performance year to date. I don't like that kind of stuffiness. They want to come and know. It's almost like a wedding reception, to be quite honest with you, because everyone wants to come up and talk with us and share, what they're doing with their new income, that they generate passively. And we just talk about friends, family, and fun things that they get to do because of our safe investments. So we just do it once a year locally. Have
Amazing.
gift bags. It's a family affair, and it's just an open house where they can pop in and take some pictures and have a glass of champagne and connect with other people.
That's amazing. Okay. So how does it, so what's the minimum? Like if I wanted to invest, how much, what's the minimum?
So we're for accredited investors only. The minimum is 50K. It's an
Okay.
evergreen fund, meaning it's always going to be open-ended. People invest in it, and they have the diversification across our entire loan portfolio. So we don't hold real estate in our fund. It's strictly loans that are backed by real estate that are the asset that's held within this private debt fund. And we grew it to, at close to 40 plus million under management before I actually started a fund. We very much enjoyed doing the whole trust deed private placement because it was less work for us to have to manage the constant deployment. And it meant we could be much more conservative and slow rolling to pick the deals that really made sense for our clients. We still do the same thing with the fund because we don't add leverage. We want to keep our LTVs below 70% combined loan to value. We do first and second lien positions. So our overall total portfolio loan to value is under 60%. I'm pretty proud of that.
That's amazing. So, so you will do firsts where the asset is the collateral, but you'll also do seconds where what's the collateral?
It's still real estate. We'll only go behind bank loans, 30-year fixed. So there's not a very strong likelihood that they'll default, but even if they do, there's not a lot of punitive measures in there that would destroy our equity protection. Many times we're crossing in first and second. So we appeal to a lot of BRRRR investors who are sitting on a stabilized property that's generating a whole lot of income. They don't want to rewrite or refinance that 3.5% loan that they got 3 years ago, but they're sitting on a ton of equity. So we'll put a second on that rental. We'll help them acquire the new property in first position. So we basically have two pieces of assets now. I have an acquired flip or fix and hold, and then I have a second on their rental property, or maybe two rental properties. It just depends. Um, and that helps add further security. And then the borrower can refinance out through a rate and term refinance, which is a higher loan to value for them and typically costs less and lower interest rate.
What kind of returns do you give your investors? Because obviously you've got two people in this mix, right? You've got the person that you're giving the loan to, but you've got the investors who you need to give a return to.
Yep. So last year, our annualized return, I think, was hovering around 10.75. And again, this is on a debt fund that's unlevered. So we do loans that are typically between 8 and 10 months. So you're always having that return of capital, redeploying it, reassessing risk. We don't employ institutional capital to leverage our funds so that we can amplify our returns. We just keep it straight and simple. And we find that that's an easier way for us to stabilize the fund itself. Doing loans in second lien position, though, allows us to charge a little bit more. Why? Because it's not something that's really offered out there at scale, especially, in Washington State. Like, we were the only ones. And so we had an endless amount of opportunity to fund really solid, good deals backed by a really solid rental portfolio that no one else would do unless they refinanced out of that 30-year mortgage. And so if we can charge 10 to 12% in first lien position, but charge 12 to 14% in second lien position, we're going to be able to generate higher returns. And it was very important for us to do so because we migrated everyone over to the fund about 3 years ago. And you better believe my existing investors had some solid expectations on what their returns were going to be. And
For
if
sure.
I went below that, I don't think that they would have been confident in bringing that capital over into the fund with us.
Are you happy you did the fund?
I am. I'm very happy. I mean, I knew enough to know that my husband and I started this kind of haphazardly, it's random, boats and
Right.
and
Mine.
conversation.
Right.
We're relationship driven people, right? Like, we knew that if we did this safely, if we underwrote the loan safely, if we talked to the borrower and the investor and made sure they both could sleep well at night, then we were doing something good. Bringing it over into a pooled debt fund where you have now securities implications, SEC could be involved, a lot of blue sky filings. It's a much, much more complex business model. Not to mention that when capital is returned, if I have a $2.5 million loan that returns, I got to deploy $2.5 million, and I got to do it relatively quickly, or I'm going to have diminished returns. So there was that cash drag component, that constant cash management, that I knew that I needed to make sure that we brought on somebody really effective at providing the strategic guidance and run the financial operations of it. Now, I'm deeply involved in it because I'm the CIO of our fund, but we have a seasoned hedge fund manager that really can provide that expertise and the financial acumen to make sure that we're really playing it safe and that we know what our numbers are and that we can continually provide those returns for our clients. He manages our fund administrator. We do everything above board, third party. We don't have it audited yet because we're still, for in terms of funds, relatively young, in our third year. But we always have it third party checked and make sure that we have those checks and balances in place to make sure that everyone feels comfortable.
Are you three the only or four people on the team, or there's more people on the team?
There's four of us. So there's my husband and I that are majority shareholders. I have our fund manager, Gerard Figarelli, who's a seasoned hedge fund manager from Wall Street. And then our other business partner, Bill Sue, is our attorney. So he's our legal advisor. So it's just really a perfect mix, right? Because we'd already had a really great business operations going. We wanted to take it to that next level, but we didn't want to sacrifice any sort of, uh, you know, quality of what we did by bringing it over into a fund. And so that's where we have a really well balanced team. We've got an administrator that helps us. She helps onboard our clients, and does our second check of all of our month end and quarter end from our fund administrator. And Juji's wonderful at that. And then, of course, I have on the Flynn family lending side a whole team that are staffed really to provide the origination support that we need.
So Flynn family funding is something different than the fund?
Technically speaking, yes. Flynn Family Lending is our origination business, really geared towards our borrowers. That's how we're known out in the real estate community here in Washington and in other states. But it is powered by Lend to Live, which is our private debt fund.
So interesting. Do you know how many loans do you do a quarter on average?
So it vacillates back and forth. I think that volume wise, we typically do, 5 to 10 loans a month.
Okay.
Last month,
Amazing.
actually, in March, was our biggest month ever, and we funded, I think, about 8 million. So we're not big, we're not small by any stretch. We want to try and navigate that middle space where we're really providing that creative touch to financing that other hard money lenders can't. But we don't want to get too big where we lose our agility and our high touch service.
And you said that the loans are less than a year.
Yes. I mean, if it's a commercial property, we might structure it so that it's a little bit longer, maybe 18 months to 24. We want to mix it up and have some diversification in our portfolio and really manage concentration risk. So we don't ever want too many loans coming back at the same time. We don't want too many loans or too large of loans out with a single borrower. So we're really trying to manage our concentration both on the borrower side and the investor side as well.
That's fascinating. Yeah, you really, like, for me, yeah, when I build a shopping center and I do 10 leases, at once, it's very important to straddle the expirations so that
Yes.
they don't all come due for expiration in the same year, 10 years from now or 5 years from now. So yeah, you don't want all these loans coming due at the same time, and you don't want one borrower. And the same thing with retail tenants and shopping centers. I never want to have one tenant that has 3 stores out of 10, because he has a problem, you have a problem.
Exactly. We were like, yay, we funded 8 million. Wait a second. When this all comes back in
Yeah,
January, are we going to be ready? So yeah, I
right.
mean, well, we're benefiting from, high yield money market accounts that we can put some of our unused capital in to help offset the cash drag. So if this were 5 years ago and, you couldn't get much more than a 1% interest rate on
Right.
these, it would be a much different situation. And that's why hard money lenders back then were leveraging a lot of their loans and getting warehouse lines of credit. But we're still managing it quite well. I think that our goal is to always just provide really no-brainer type of funding so that we all can sleep well at night. Because I'm a very high anxiety kind of person. Like I can't deal if I know that things are going to go sideways and my clients would be upset. I couldn't live with that. So
Good sleep is underrated, I think. I mean,
oh,
I love
100%.
I love a good night's sleep. I don't want, yeah, I was just on the phone with someone today and he said, so, if we really want to do it right, we need to do it this way. I go, that's the way we're doing it. Like there's no
I'm sure there are other women that are listening in on this that are like, yeah, I'm hitting perimenopause or menopause. Like, amen, sister, 100% agree with you, because I am right there with you. Like if it's a good night's sleep and I can sleep 8 hours consistently, that is a blessing and doesn't happen all the time. I think we
Well,
both can probably say that.
every morning I look at my Aura ring and say, how did I sleep last night? I think I slept pretty good. And then like when it says, oh, you 92, like I'm like, okay, great. How many do you lend to a lot of women? Do you know the percentage of women versus like single women or couples? Do you have any stats on that?
I don't. I would say that I'd probably say that it's about 25%, to be honest with you. But we are seeing a lot of partnerships where it is a woman and a man choosing to join up. They probably both have spouses too that probably aren't super interested in being part of the active investing journey. And they're trying to offset their blinders, if you will. Like if they're really good at systems and operations or acquisitions, then they need somebody else that can handle the actual hands-on, the contractors, the dispo. So we are seeing a lot of teams that have, a female and a male on there, and it's something that seems to be working out well. But we are very still heavily dominated by men.
Yeah, but 25 is great. That's awesome. So you have a coaching program.
I do, yes.
Let's talk about that because so everyone know I get up at the conference and I say, I'm not going to upsell you to a mastermind. I don't have any coaching programs. I mean, I don't know anything about fix and flips, or I used to call wholesaling warehousing. I put women on stage in all different asset classes. And I say, if you want self-storage, then go talk to this person that does self-storage. I can't teach you how to do self-storage. I've never done self-storage. So I want to expose and inspire and bring awareness, but I leave it to others to have coaching programs to share with the audience because they're hungry after I expose them, then they're hungry for the next step. And I just defer to other people. So share.
Yeah, I mean, it was again not planned. Never planned on writing a book. It was an opportunity that presented itself from my co-author, and there was a need, right? Like for 8 years, while I was trying to build this business and never intended on it being a business, there wasn't really anybody I could lean on, and any book out there, any resource, really just skim the surface. Like tells you how great it is and what kind of returns it can make, but they don't tell you how to do it. They don't tell you how to safeguard. So when the opportunity presented itself, and in my background as an instructional designer and training and development, I thought, yeah, we could totally do this because it's so needed out there. And most women don't want to roll up their sleeves and flip houses. They want to and they honestly, we don't really also want to deal with tenants and, have run-ins. Like some of my borrowers, they love that stuff. They're wearing their rent due caps and they get off on stuff like that. But like, I needed something more passive. I wanted to hang out with my kids and take them to soccer. I didn't really want to deal with all that stuff. So if we could evangelize what private money lending was, really spell it out in the book, like the end-to-end life cycle, as I mentioned, so you knew every step of the way what you needed to do. And the CPR lending system, the C's are the steps, starting with calculate and evaluate and defining your guidelines, defining your goals, all that good stuff, all the way up to close, and conveying when they pay off. The P is for paperwork, property, people. Who do you have to work with? What kind of paperwork do you need to look at? What kind of paperwork do you need to draft up? What do you need to look at for that property, that project? And then the R is the risks and rewards. What I found out about after the book was that it just whet the appetite again. I mean, 300 meaty pages, but they still lacked a community to say, how do I connect with other private lenders? How do I get the help that I need in real time if I have a deal and money to lend out? And it sounds good, but then what? So there was really a need for one, a companion guide for the book to say, okay, here's the step-by-step process and on-demand videos and worksheets and stuff like that really help you come to conclusion on what you want to lend on, who you want to lend to, articulating an elevator pitch and figuring out where you need to go out there, either social media or meetups, to find prospective borrowers. How do you have that conversation? These are things that you really can't explain very well in a book format, right? So the on demand course was something that really just embellished upon what the book was. But we're also going to have a community because people, they just want to belong to a community to be able to ask questions, no matter where you're at in the life cycle. I got 50K. What do I do next? I found a borrower. What do I do next? I got a title commitment. It's got a bunch of junk on it. Who can help me look at it? My borrow's late on payments. Now what? The community is something that I find particularly women want to be connected to. Like we are all of an abundance mindset where we want to share. I find women do this way more than men do. Some men do, but they're also a little bit safeguarded and secretive too, which is why it was so hard for me to learn 10 years ago. Women want to get on there and share and learn from each other. There's no sacred cows. They're willing to put that out there and say, what do you think? And there's no ego about it. It's like, if I like this deal and you tell me here's 4 things you don't like about it, I'm still a grown woman. I can still make my own decision, but you just gave me something else to think about. Well, that perspective is absolutely what's important to really safe and secure private money lending. And so without that community, I don't know if it really would work out very well, be kind of isolated as I was. And so
Right.
this is something that didn't plan on doing, but seems like there's such a need out there.
So how do they, if they're interested in looking more into that, what's the best way for them to reach you?
You can go to my website, lendtolive.com. It's lend, the number two, live.com. And there's actually information about investing with us, but there's also learn with us. I'll host some live events throughout the year too, like small masterminds. Um, I'm going to be launching the course actually next week. So that will be something that people can uh, join at any time and do it self-paced. And then the community will come out here in the next month or two.
So how much is the course?
Uh, Good question. I don't know. I think it's 14.97. I'm not totally sure, but it's
Yes.
hours and hours, not hours and hours. I wanted to make a nice fine balance between giving you an actionable step, right? Like figure out your goals first. What kind of capital do you have to work with?
Right.
Figuring out your market. So it's really sequential in that regard.
What is the biggest loan you've ever made?
Oh, well, probably about 2.5 million.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of my women in my community are gonna, yeah, and you lend around the country or just in the Northwest?
Mostly in the Northwest. We have delved into other states like Missouri. We've done loans in Texas and Arizona. Predominantly, we do Washington State. We're launching in Missouri soon. We've done loans in Tennessee and looking at Pennsylvania. So there are some markets that we would be open to. Done loans in Alabama. If it's a surefire deal, I'm not going to say no. But we tend to try to make sure that we have the appropriate resources in place locally before we can do so.
And what's the predominant asset class that you're investing on? Is it more fix and flips or do you do other asset classes?
We do fix and flips and fix and holds. I would say that a vast majority are resi. So whether that is 1 to 4 unit, 5+ commercial multifamily, mixed use, mobile home parks, we do all of those. I find that there's a lot of equity and high cash flow in mobile home parks because they have to have such low leverage. So we've done some seconds on those in the past as well. It really just runs the gamut. But we try to have some commercial in there, but we're very, very careful about what we place in there. I like mixed use better than pure office space, for example, or
Right.
retail, because we have to be a little bit careful about where we're headed here in the next 12 to 24 months in commercial.
Absolutely. Well, this has been amazing. I love everything you're doing. I'm definitely I'm very interested in investing. So I'm gonna do more of a deeper dive on that.
Please
Um,
do. Would love to talk to you more about that. Appreciate that.
yeah, I think it's so unique. I don't know anyone. I
And
don't know
this
anyone.
could be a call you could record though, Beth, because I think like other women, they need to know how to vet out fund managers, how to vet out GPs. And I don't know how much if you do that in your in your world. But women need to know, like, what are the questions I should be asking? What kind of things should I be looking for? There's not a lot of education on how to vet out a deal, the person itself that's managing the fund, and asking the right questions about the fund itself.
For sure. I love that. Well, Beth, thank you so much. I've been waiting for you to come. I'm so happy that you're here, and we'll definitely stay in touch. I'm going to definitely go look at lendtolive.com. I think it's an interesting diversification for me. And I want to support other women. So, and ladies and gentlemen who are watching, we have 115 tonight. How great is that? Sometimes we get some questions, but no questions tonight. I think that everyone's probably just going, wow, this is amazing. So I hope that please reach out to Beth. We've put her information. Thank you so much. And I look forward to speaking to you and seeing you soon.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Beth.